The chandeliers shimmered above the grand hall, their reflections rippling across marble floors polished to mirror perfection. The air carried the scent of expensive perfume and aged champagne. Conversations hummed, laughter rose and fell like the tide, and a live jazz band played softly from the balcony. The Carter Foundation annual gala was the kind of night where power pretended to be generosity. Cameras flashed, diamonds sparkled, and smiles were rehearsed. Ethan Cole stepped into the room with the ease of a man used to attention but tired of earning it. At 35, he was already a billionaire, the founder of Oralink, a company that turned whispers of code into empires. He wore a black suit, cut sharp enough to command a boardroom, and a heart armored by habit. People greeted him with practiced admiration. He nodded politely, his expression smooth and unreadable. His thoughts elsewhere. He had promised himself this would be quick, an appearance, a speech, a few photographs, then back to silence. But fate rarely waits for permission. He saw her just beyond the crowd near the serving tables. A woman in a black uniform, carrying a tray of champagne flutes. For a second, he thought the light was playing tricks on him. She turned her head slightly, and the world stopped. Her profile struck him first, then the quiet grace in the way she moved, calm but careful, like someone who had learned to disappear in plain sight. His chest tightened. He could not look away. Her hair was the same deep chestnut, pulled loosely behind her neck, a few strands falling free. But what shattered him was not her face. It was the glint of silver at her throat, a necklace. A small crescent moon wrapped around a compass rose. The same necklace he had designed 15 years ago. The same one he had placed around Lily Hart's neck the night before she vanished from his life. The one they said was buried with her. Ethan's hand trembled. The glass he held caught the light and fractured it into shards across the floor. He barely noticed. The jazz, the chatter, the laughter all dissolved into silence. It could not be. Lily was gone. He had buried her memory, buried the ache that came with it. He had built his fortune from the ruins of that loss. But the necklace was unmistakable. Every curve, every engraving burned into his memory. The promise he had carved into it whispered back to him now. Find north. He took a step forward, breath shallow. The woman moved through the room, unaware that she had just resurrected a ghost. She leaned over to refill glasses, smiled softly at strangers, and vanished between tables. Ethan followed his heart, pounding louder than the music. For a moment she turned, and their eyes met. Her expression polite, professional. His undone. He whispered before he could stop himself. Lily. The name slipped out like a prayer. She blinked, confused, unsure whether he was speaking to her. Her brows furrowed slightly. Then she gave a small apologetic smile. I am sorry, sir. Did you need something? Ethan froze. The voice was gentler than he remembered, touched by years, yet achingly familiar. He forced himself to answer. No, I am fine, thank you. She nodded, turned away, and continued her work. The silver pendant swung as she moved, catching the light again, daring him to question reality. He could not. He had seen too many faces in boardrooms and photographs to mistake hers. Every fiber in him screamed that it was her. Yet how could she be alive when he had seen her coffin lowered into the ground 15 years ago? He took a step after her, but a hand clapped his shoulder. Ethan, good to see you here. The voice belonged to a business partner. He murmured, a distracted, greeting eyes still on the woman, now disappearing toward the service hallway. He slipped away from the conversation, ignoring the curious looks, and pushed through the side door. The hallway was colder, quieter, smelling faintly of detergent and steel. The noise from the ballroom became a muffled heartbeat behind him. At the end of the hall, she stood by the exit, sorting empty trays. He stopped a few feet away. The air between them felt heavy, like the moment before confession. "Do I know you?" he asked quietly. She looked at him, puzzled, cautious. "I do not think so, sir." Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to ask 100 questions, but managed only one. "That necklace. Where did you get it?" She glanced down at it, fingers brushing the pendant. "Oh, this, I have had it for as long as I can remember. It is old, I think." The answer hit him like a blow. She stepped past him toward the door, her scent faintly of coffee and rain. As she pushed the door open, he caught the engraving on the back. LH 2008 Find North. The door closed softly behind her. Ethan stood motionless, the echo of that inscription pounding in his chest. The same words carved on the twin pendant he still kept locked in his desk. He whispered to no one, voice breaking through the silence. 15 years ago, I buried her memory. Outside the glass windows, the city shimmered beneath the night sky, distant and cold. A single star glimmered faintly through the haze. "Tonight," he said quietly, I saw her alive." The morning after the gala, the city looked colder than usual. Gray light stretched across the skyline, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise. Ethan Cole sat by the window of his penthouse, a half-empty cup of coffee, cooling beside untouched papers. Below him, New York pulsed with purpose, cars threading through streets that never learned to sleep. To most people, his view was the definition of success. To him, it was noise. 15 years had turned him into everything he once swore he would never become. A man defined by numbers, mergers, and press releases. The heart he once gave freely now existed only behind layers of glass and calculation. He looked at his reflection, tired eyes, and the faint shadow of someone who had learned to smile on cue. The image of the waitress from last night haunted him. That necklace, that face. Every rational part of his mind told him it was coincidence, but the tremor in his hands said otherwise. Ethan was not a man who believed in miracles, not anymore. He had buried that part of himself the night he buried her. 15 years ago, he had been nothing more than a dreamer, with a prototype in his garage and a girl who believed in him. Lily Hart had painted his life with color and noise. She had made him believe the world could be more than algorithms and ambition. When the accident happened, the light went out. In the weeks that followed, he worked himself into numbness, turned grief into fuel and success into a form of anesthesia. The first billion came the same year he stopped playing piano. The tabloids called him the silent architect. They wrote about his brilliance, his mystery, his refusal to date. They never wrote about the fact that he still woke up some nights hearing her laugh carried on the wind. His phone buzzed. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen. He stared at it for a moment before pressing decline. Vanessa was beautiful, intelligent, and carefully chosen by his PR team. Their engagement was a transaction disguised as romance. Her voice had the precision of someone who rehearsed everything she said. Even the way she looked at him felt managed. She wanted his image, not his soul. He no longer had one to offer. He rose from his seat and crossed to his desk, pulling open the bottom drawer. Inside was a small wooden box with worn edges. He lifted the lid. Inside lay the twin to the necklace he had seen last night. Half a moon, half a compass, engraved with the same words. For Lily. May our hearts always find north. He traced the letters with his thumb memories, flickering like film reels too damaged to play clearly. He remembered the beach, the smell of salt and rain, her hair whipping across her face as she laughed. He had given her the necklace the night before the storm. She had told him it would always bring her home. He had believed her until she never came back. The knock on the door startled him. His assistant Ryan stepped in, holding a stack of folders. "Morning, sir. The board meeting is in 20 minutes. Ethan nodded, slipping the pendant back into its box. "Cancel it." Ryan blinked. "Sir." The man's voice was calm but firm. "Cancel everything for today." He needed space air, something that made sense. He needed to know if what he saw last night was real. When Ryan left, Ethan leaned against the edge of the desk and stared out over the city. The rational part of him fought back. Maybe she had sold the necklace years ago. Maybe it was just a copy. Maybe he was losing his mind. But the ache in his chest would not let go. He picked up his phone, opened a search, and typed the catering company's name, printed on the menu from last night. Prestige Events and Dining. He called the number. A woman's voice answered cheerfully. Prestige Events. "How may I assist you?" He cleared his throat. "I attended the Carter Foundation gala last night. There was a server there, mid-30s, brown hair, green eyes. Do you know who that might have been?" The receptionist hesitated. "We employ over 60 staff for those events, sir. Could you be more specific?" He hesitated too. The necklace, the eyes, the impossible familiarity. "No," he said finally. "Never mind." He hung up before she could respond. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration rising. He was a man who could trace satellites and data networks across continents, but he could not find one woman. He went to his piano in the corner of the room, an antique Steinway covered in dust. He had not touched it in years. He lifted the lid, pressed a single key. The sound was soft, uncertain, like something waking after too long. He sat down, hands hovering above the keys, then let them fall into a melody he did not remember learning. It was her song, the one she used to hum while painting. Notes filled the room, spilling into the hollow spaces of his penthouse. For the first time in years, the sound did not feel empty. It felt like a memory clawing back from the dark. He stopped playing abruptly, his breath uneven. This was madness. Lily was gone. He had seen the wreck, read the report, signed the condolences. Yet every beat of that song whispered otherwise. He stood pacing the room, the melody still echoing in his head. The city stretched endlessly outside his window, alive and indifferent. Somewhere out there, a woman with Lily's face was serving drinks and wearing the promise he had once made under the stars. He whispered to the quiet room as if she could hear him through the miles. "If you are still out there, I will find you." He closed the box, locked it back in the drawer, and turned toward the door. For the first time in 15 years, Ethan Cole believed in something he could not explain. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds of a small Brooklyn apartment, cutting across the cluttered counter and the smell of burnt toast. Anna Reed stood barefoot in the kitchen, tying her apron with one hand while balancing a lunchbox in the other. The coffee pot sputtered, and the sound of a child's laughter came from the hallway. Jamie, 10 years old, his hair a mess of curls, appeared, carrying his backpack that was almost bigger than him. "You forgot your sketchbook, Mom," he said, holding it up like a prize. She smiled, taking it gently. "Thanks, baby, I would lose my head if it was not attached." He grinned. "You say that every morning." She laughed softly, brushing his hair from his forehead. He was the only constant in a life built out of broken routines and faint memories. She walked him down 3 flights of stairs to where the school bus waited, kissed his cheek, and waved until it disappeared around the corner. When she turned back, the street smelled of rain and asphalt, and the city was already awake. Cabs honked, dogs barked, and the world moved forward without waiting for anyone. Anna pulled her jacket tighter around her and started walking toward the cafe. She worked the morning shift at a small coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a flower store. It was quiet there, full of regulars who ordered the same drinks every day and tipped just enough to remind her they noticed. The owner, Mrs. Alvarez, was kind but practical. "You are late, sweetheart," she said as Anna entered, but the words carried no anger. "Sorry the toaster attacked me again," Anna joked, tying her hair into a messy bun. Mrs. Alvarez chuckled. "You need a better toaster or a better apartment." Anna smiled without answering. Her apartment was small, old, and cheap, but it was theirs. It was enough. The morning passed in a blur of coffee cups and chatter. Between orders, she wiped tables and hummed a tune she could not place. Sometimes melodies came to her like ghosts, half-remembered songs that felt like they belonged to someone she used to be. She never questioned them anymore. Questions led to pain. At noon, she took a short break and sat by the window with a cup of tea. Outside, a delivery truck splashed through puddles left from the night before. She reached for the pendant around her neck, fingers tracing the worn metal. The engraving on the back had faded long ago, but she still liked the way it caught the light. She had no memory of where it came from, only that it had been with her for as long as she could remember. Sometimes, when she was tired or sad, she would close her eyes and feel warmth spreading from it, as if it were whispering something she could not quite understand. Mrs. Alvarez noticed her staring. "You hold that thing like it is magic," she said kindly. "Maybe it is," Anna replied, smiling faintly. Later that afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Prestige Events and Dining the Catering Company she worked for on weekends. Extra staff needed tonight. Carter Foundation Gala. Black uniform, hair tied. She hesitated. The pay was good, and Jamie's school trip next month still needed covering. She texted back, "I will take it." By evening, she was in the company van heading toward Midtown, staring out the window as the skyline glowed against the darkening sky. The city looked almost unreal from this distance, too perfect, too clean. She wondered what it would feel like to belong to that kind of world. When they arrived, she followed the other servers into the loading dock, changed into her uniform, and pinned her name tag. Anna Reed, service staff. The ballroom was breathtaking. She moved through it quietly, refilling glasses, exchanging polite smiles. With strangers in expensive shoes, events like this always made her feel invisible, yet in a strange way she liked it. There was safety in being unseen. She noticed the art on the walls, the soft jazz, the sea of glittering people, pretending they cared about charity. She wondered what kind of lives they returned to when the lights went off. Around 9, as she carried a tray of champagne across the room, a strange sensation brushed over her. A tremor of recognition, faint and fleeting. She paused, her eyes drawn to the crowd for no reason she could explain. A man had just entered, tall, dark suit expression, distant. For a split second, their eyes met. Something inside her chest tightened painfully. She did not know why, but the sight of him made her pulse quicken. There was something in the way he looked at her, shock, disbelief, sorrow all at once. She quickly turned away, focusing on her work. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the glasses. She told herself it was nothing, just another guest, another night. Yet long after the gala ended and the guests had gone, she could not shake that look from her mind. Back home past midnight, she slipped quietly into her apartment so as not to wake Jamie. The silence felt heavier than usual. She stood before the mirror, pulling off her earrings, then her uniform, until only the necklace remained. The metal gleamed faintly under the dim light. She whispered softly to her reflection, "Who were you before this?" Her voice trembled as if afraid of the answer. She brushed the pendant once more, and for a fleeting second an image flashed through her mind waves, crashing against a beach. A voice calling her name through the wind. Then it was gone, leaving behind only the sound of her own breathing. She pressed the pendant to her lips and lay down beside her sleeping son, staring at the ceiling until the city noise faded into dreams she would never fully remember. The next evening arrived with rain whispering against the windows of the Midtown ballroom. Chandeliers shimmered like liquid gold, the air humming with polite laughter and the faint melody of a jazz quartet. Anna moved between tables, tray balanced effortlessly. Her mind focused on rhythm and repetition, pour, smile, nod, walk away. It was the only way to keep herself steady when surrounded by so much noise. Ethan Cole entered late, dressed in a charcoal suit that caught the light with every step. Conversations dipped briefly as guests turned to greet him, some with admiration, others with curiosity. He responded with a smile that did not reach his eyes. His assistant trailed behind him, murmuring something about investors, but Ethan was not listening. The moment he stepped into the room, he felt the same pull in his chest as the night before, an ache he could neither explain nor suppress. He scanned the crowd and found her almost instantly. Anna was near the far end of the hall, refilling a line of glasses at the dessert table. The sight of her hit him with such force that for a second he forgot where he was. She was laughing softly at something another server said, and that laugh, quiet but real, felt like sunlight breaking through years of fog. He stood frozen, unsure whether to approach or to flee. His mind argued that it could not be Lily. His heart whispered that it was. When she turned slightly and their eyes met again, across the room, the world seemed to pause. Everything around them blurred, the voices, the music, the lights. For a heartbeat, it was just the two of them, the same way it had been years ago, on the edge of a storm, her hair in the wind, her smile daring him to believe in forever. The spell broke when a guest brushed past him. Anna looked away, first startled by his gaze, and focused on a glass that slipped from her hand. It shattered on the marble floor, champagne spilling like liquid gold. She bent down to clean it up, apologizing quickly. "I am so sorry, sir." Ethan knelt beside her instinctively, reaching out. Their hands almost touched. He saw the pendant sway forward from her neck, the compass glinting under the light. His breath caught. "Lily," he whispered the word, barely escaping. Anna looked up, confused. "I am sorry, what did you say?" He blinked, realizing what he had done. "Nothing, I just wanted to make sure you are all right." Their eyes locked again, and for a brief, unbearable moment, recognition flickered in hers. something fragile and fleeting, like the ghost of a memory, but then it vanished. She smiled awkwardly, gathering the glass shards. "I am fine, thank you, sir." He wanted to tell her everything every sleepless night, every what-if that had haunted him for 15 years. Instead, he stood up watching as she hurried away. The ballroom noise swallowed her again, but Ethan could not shake the image of her trembling hands, or the sound of her voice. He moved to the bar, ordered a drink he would not touch, and watched her from afar for the rest of the evening. She carried herself with quiet strength, a grace that came not from privilege, but from endurance. When the gala ended, guests began to leave in waves of perfume and chatter. Ethan lingered near the exit until she passed by, her uniform slightly wrinkled exhaustion in her eyes. He stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said gently. She turned, startled. "Yes, sir." He held out an envelope with the catering company's logo. "I think you dropped this," he lied. She frowned, checking her pockets. "I did not, but thank you." He hesitated, then slipped a small card inside before handing it to her. "My mistake," he said quietly. "Just thought you might need it." She took it politely. "Thank you, sir. Have a good evening." Her fingers brushed his for a second, warm, real alive, and he felt the old wound inside him tear open. As she walked away, he watched her disappear through the side corridor leading to the staff exit. He unfolded his hand and saw the imprint of her touch still burning on his skin. The sound of rain deepened outside, echoing the weight in his chest. Somewhere between reason and madness, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was not over, not this time. The city didn't sleep that night, but Ethan didn't either. Back in his penthouse, overlooking the Hudson, he sat in the dark, with only the skyline for company, replaying every second of that encounter. The way she moved, the tone of her voice, the necklace that should not exist, every detail, haunted him like a ghost refusing to stay buried. 15 years of convincing himself she was gone had disintegrated in the span of a few breaths. He poured himself a drink, the ice clinking like tiny shatters of memory. His reflection in the glass window stared back at him, older, harder, emptier. Ethan opened his laptop and began to dig. He still had the skills of a man who built an empire out of data. Within hours, he was tracing records. Anna Reed, Brooklyn, born 1990, no prior ID until 2010, no social security data before that. It was as if she had appeared out of thin air 15 years ago, the same year Lily Hart supposedly died. He leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. Could she have survived the crash impossible? He had seen the wreck stood at her funeral, placed flowers on a coffin. But what if the coffin had been empty? He clicked open another tab and searched for hospital records near the crash site on Long Island. One result caught his eye. A Jane Doe admitted the same night as the accident, critical head trauma, no identification. Released months later to a rehabilitation center under a new name. He felt the blood drain from his face. Anna Reed. Meanwhile, across the river, in a small apartment in Brooklyn, Anna sat awake in bed, the sound of rain whispering against her window. Jamie was asleep in the next room, his soft breathing a rhythm she could never tire of. She turned the pendant in her fingers, the metal cool against her skin. Sometimes she dreamed of places she didn't recognize. A beach, a lighthouse, a voice calling her name through the wind. But whenever she tried to hold on to it, the images scattered like smoke. She didn't know why this necklace felt so heavy, so sacred. The couple who found her 15 years ago had said she was lucky to be alive. They told her she was found on the side of the road, injured with no memory and no ID. The doctors said trauma could erase the past, and maybe it was better that way. But lately fragments were coming back. Colors, sounds, a laugh that wasn't her own. That afternoon at the cafe where she worked mornings, Jamie played with a small wooden trinket he'd discovered in an old box she kept under the sink. It was a compass, delicate and worn, carved with a faint letter C. He ran his finger over it. "Mom, look, it still spins?" She smiled absently, pouring coffee. "Where did you find that in your box of old things?" "It's cool. Mr. Hayes says it looks like something from Oralink's first product line." She froze. "What did you say, Oralink?" he repeated. "That tech company. Mr. Hayes loves their gadgets. He said this looks just like one of the prototypes from 2008. Anna's hand trembled as she reached for the compass. The year echoed in her head like thunder. She didn't know why, but something inside her cracked open. Later that day, while closing the cafe, she stared out at the rain, her fingers gripping the pendant tightly. A flash hit her sand under her feet. A man's laughter, his hand brushing her hair away as he whispered, "Promise me, no matter what happens, you'll find me again." The sound of tires screeching followed glass-breaking water darkness. She gasped, nearly dropping the cup she was holding. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, leaving her shaken. That night she sat with Jamie at the kitchen table, trying to focus on his homework. But her mind drifted back to the gala, to the man who had looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever said. "Mom," Jamie's voice broke through. "Are you okay?" She forced a smile. "Yeah, baby, just tired." He nodded and went back to his math worksheet. When he went to bed, she took out the business card the man had given her. Ethan Cole, founder, Oralink Technologies. The name stirred something deep inside her, something she couldn't name. She opened her laptop and typed his name. The search results filled the screen headlines about the youngest tech billionaire, his mysterious withdrawal from public life. After a personal tragedy whispers about a lost fiancé, she clicked an old article from 2009. Tragic accident claims life of Lily Hart fiancé of Ethan Cole. Her hand flew to her mouth. The photo beneath the headline stole her breath. It was her, or someone who looked exactly like her, smiling beside Ethan wearing the same necklace. She stared at the screen until the words blurred. In another part of the city, Ethan was on the phone with a private investigator. "Find out everything you can about Anna Reed. Employment history, medical records, anything. I need to know where she came from." The investigator hesitated. "This might get personal, Mr. Cole. Are you sure, more than sure?" He hung up and sat in silence, the hum of the city below him like a heartbeat. He thought about the last time he saw Lily, her laughter in the wind, the crash, the blood on his hands. He had spent years burying that night under success, but now the ghosts were clawing their way back. The next day, Anna walked through Central Park on her way to work. It was early morning, the world still wrapped in mist. She paused by the lake, tracing the necklace absently. For a moment she swore she could hear someone call her name, carried by the wind. Lily. She turned sharply, heart pounding. No one was there. Just a man jogging with his dog. But the name echoed through her, stirring something old and familiar. That evening, when she got home, she found a small envelope under her door. Inside was a single photo, her at the gala, with the pendant gleaming under the light, and a note, "Meet me tomorrow." "I can tell you who you are." No name, no signature, Just an address, the Hart Gallery, 45th Street. Her hands trembled as she read it again. The name Hart pressed against her chest like a heartbeat she hadn't heard in years. Across the city, Ethan stood at that same gallery, long-abandoned dust covering every surface except one. A painting of a woman standing by the sea, her hair tangled in the wind, her eyes filled with light. He traced the signature in the corner, L. Hart, and for the first time in 15 years, he whispered aloud, "I'm coming for you." The next afternoon, gray clouds rolled over Manhattan like slow smoke as Ethan waited inside the Hart Gallery. The place had been closed for years, dust softening every frame, except the one he had restored himself, the painting she had finished the summer before the accident. It showed a shoreline at dusk, a woman in a white dress standing at the edge of the sea, the horizon swallowing the last light. Her signature, L. Hart, shimmered faintly under the glass. He stood there, hands in pockets, heart pounding with the uncertainty of a man about to face a ghost. At exactly 4 o'clock, the door creaked open. Anna stepped inside, cautiously, her eyes scanning the room as if afraid of what she might find. "You sent this?" she asked, holding the note. Ethan turned his voice low. "Yes." The sound of his voice made her chest tighten. She remembered that tone not from memory but from instinct. "You shouldn't have. You came anyway." Their eyes met, and the silence between them was heavy with years neither could name. She took a step closer, glancing at the painting. "This place feels strange, like I've been here before." Ethan followed her gaze to the canvas. "You have." She frowned, uncertain. "How could I?" He hesitated, walking toward her slowly, his words measured. "Because you painted that." Her laugh was small, nervous. "That's impossible. I can't even draw a straight line." He didn't smile. Instead, he picked up a folder from the table beside him and opened it. "Your name isn't Anna Reed, it's Lily Hart. You were an art student, a dreamer, and you loved this place more than anything." She blinked, her body tensing. "You've made a mistake. I wish I had," he said softly. "But I spent the last 48 hours digging through hospital records, police reports, everything. The night of the crash, they brought in a Jane Doe, no ID, head trauma. The doctors said she wouldn't remember much if she survived." He paused, meeting her eyes. She did survive. They released her months later under the name Anna Reed. Anna's breathing quickened. "This isn't real. You can't just show up and tell me who I am." Ethan took a step closer, his expression breaking. "I'm not trying to tell you. I'm trying to remind you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay a matching pendant, half of a silver moon, engraved with faint letters. "You wore the other half," he said, his voice trembling. "You never took it off." Her eyes dropped to the necklace around her neck, then back to him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I lost you once and I can't lose you again." The truth in his voice hit her harder than she expected. She shook her head, tears threatening. "I don't know you." "You do," he whispered. "Your hands used to smell like paint and coffee. You hated the rain but loved the sea. You said you didn't believe in destiny, only choices. And the last choice you made was to meet me that night. The night everything went wrong." Anna pressed a trembling hand to her temple. Images flickered, headlights water, a man shouting her name. Her knees nearly gave out. "Stop," she gasped. "Please stop." Ethan steadied her by the shoulders, his touch gentle but grounding. "You were everything to me," he said quietly. "When I thought you died, I built walls so high No one could reach me again. You were the reason I stopped believing in love." She looked up, eyes glistening with confusion. "Why does this hurt so much if I don't remember you?" He smiled sadly. "Because your heart does, even if your mind doesn't." A single tear slid down her cheek. "If what you're saying is true, then why didn't you find me sooner?" His voice cracked. "Because I buried you. Because I stood over your grave and said goodbye. Because your parents told me there was nothing left to find." The word parents made her flinch. "I don't remember them." "They're gone," he said softly. "They never knew you survived. No one did." She took a shaky breath, eyes darting around the gallery. "This doesn't make sense. My life, my son, everything I have now." He stepped back slightly, the revelation catching him off guard. "You have a son?" She nodded, suddenly defensive. "Yes, he's 10. His name is Jamie." The sound of it softened Ethan's expression, not with jealousy, but something deeper wonder, maybe even pride. "He's lucky to have you." "Don't do that," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't make this harder." "You think I'm here to hurt you?" he asked gently. "I'm here because I saw that necklace and realized the universe was giving me one last chance to make things right." "Things right," she repeated bitterly. "You're a billionaire and I'm a waitress. We don't even live in the same world." "We didn't back then either," he said. "And I loved you anyway." She turned away, clutching the pendant like a shield. "I don't know who I was, but I know who I am now. I have a life. I can't lose myself chasing a past I don't remember." Ethan's voice softened to a whisper. "You don't have to chase it. I'll carry it for both of us." That broke her. She spun toward him, tears spilling. "Why are you doing this to me? Because I never stopped loving you." The confession hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Anna's breath hitched as memories surged his laugh, the ocean a kiss that tasted of salt and rain. For a fleeting second she saw it all. Then just as quickly it vanished, leaving her trembling. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't do this." She turned and ran for the door, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the empty gallery. Ethan didn't follow. He just stood there staring at the space she'd left behind, the air still carrying her scent. He looked down at the two pendants lying side by side, the halves of a promise, broken by time, and whispered to no one, "You remembered once. You will again." Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, washing the dust from the glass windows as if the city itself were weeping for them both. The rain came harder that night, drumming against the windows of Ethan's penthouse, like a relentless reminder that the past had not finished with him. He stood by the glass wall overlooking Manhattan, the skyline blurred by stormlight. Her face lingered behind his eyes, every tear, every word. He had found her only to lose her again, this time not to death, but to fear. On the table behind him, his phone vibrated. Vanessa's name flashed across the screen. He let it ring twice before answering. "Where have you been?" Her voice was sharp, irritated. "The board's in chaos, Ethan. You disappeared right before the investor summit." "Do you have any idea what that looks like?" "I don't care," he said quietly. "I'm done pretending." There was a pause, followed by a dangerous laugh. "Don't tell me this is about that waitress. I saw you looking at her. People noticed. Do you want a scandal?" Ethan closed his eyes, exhaustion pressing into his bones. "Vanessa, there's nothing between us anymore. There hasn't been for a long time. You think you can throw me away that easily?" she snapped. "We're supposed to get engaged next month. That's not just romance, it's image stock, public trust." If you walk away, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." He hung up before she could finish. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Ethan poured a drink he didn't touch and stared at the storm. Somewhere out there, she was alone, confused, scared. Anna or Lily, whatever name she lived under now, was the only truth that ever mattered. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Anna sat on the edge of her bed, watching the storm from her window. Jamie slept soundly beside her, his small hand clutching the wooden compass. She brushed his hair gently, trying to keep her heart steady. The encounter at the gallery had shaken her to the core. Every word Ethan said had felt like a half-remembered dream pressing against the back of her mind. Who was she really? Could a life be built on fragments of a forgotten one? The next morning the sky cleared, leaving behind the smell of rain and asphalt. She walked to the cafe, but the moment she entered, her manager's expression made her stomach drop. "Anna, can I talk to you for a second?" She followed him into the back office. "I'm sorry," he began, not meeting her eyes, "but we're going to have to let you go." "What?" Her voice cracked. Why, he sighed. There were complaints. Someone from the Carter Foundation called, said you made an inappropriate impression on guests at the gala. We can't risk losing contracts." She stared at him, disbelief turning to anger. "That's not true. I didn't do anything, I know," he said softly. "But this is business." She left with trembling hands, the world spinning around her. Outside, she called the catering company, but they'd already been told the same thing. Someone had pulled strings to erase her from their list. By noon, she was jobless, standing under a flickering awning as the rain returned. Across town, Vanessa sat in her glass office, tapping her manicured nails against the desk as she read through an email chain. Her assistant hesitated. "Are you sure you want to do this, Ms. King?" "Absolutely," Vanessa replied coolly. "No one embarrasses me and keeps their reputation intact." She pressed send. Within an hour, whispers began spreading across. The industry rumors about a waitress who had seduced a billionaire during a charity gala. By evening, the story hit 2 online gossip pages. Ethan saw the headline and felt his stomach twist. He called his PR head. "Shut it down. We're trying," came the reply, but the leak came from someone inside the company. The narrative's already spreading. He slammed the phone onto the table. He knew who had done it. Vanessa's threat was real, and she had made good on it. Later that evening, Ethan drove to Brooklyn in the rain. He parked across from Anna's apartment, unsure what he would say. Through the window, he saw her silhouette holding her son close. Guilt burned in his chest. His world had destroyed hers again. He was about to step out of the car when headlights flashed in his mirror, another vehicle pulling up behind him. His phone rang. It was his assistant, panic in his tone. "Ethan, I don't know how to tell you this, but Vanessa's gone public. The board's forcing your resignation." Ethan exhaled slowly, a strange calm washing over him. "Then let them. I'm done." He hung up, turned off the engine, and sat in the dark. Across the street, a shadow moved near Anna's door, a man in a hood, too still, too deliberate. Instinct took over. Ethan jumped from the car just as the man raised something metallic. A knife glinted under the streetlight. "Anna!" Ethan shouted, running. The man turned, startled, and bolted into the alley. Ethan chased him through the rain-slick streets until the figure vanished into the maze of back roads. He stood there, chest heaving, soaked to the skin. By the time he returned, Anna was on the porch, pale and shaking. "What happened?" she demanded. Someone was outside, he said, breathless. He was watching you. She clutched Jamie, fear flooding her face. Who would Ethan's eyes hardened? Vanessa, he said softly. Or someone she hired. He didn't tell her the part about being forced out of his company. It didn't matter now. You need to leave this place. It's not safe. I can't just run, she said, trembling. Where would I go with me? He met her eyes. Just for tonight. She hesitated, looking at her sleeping son, then nodded slowly. Hours later, in a quiet guest room of Ethan's penthouse, Anna finally fell asleep, exhausted. Ethan stood by the doorway, watching her breathe the storm reflected in her damp hair. His heart ached with the weight of everything he'd lost, and everything he still stood to lose. Near dawn, her body twitched in sleep. Then, without warning, she gasped awake, clutching her chest. Images crashed through her mind, a car spinning glass, breaking her head, slamming against the window, water flooding in, and through it all, Ethan's voice shouting her name. Lily, don't close your eyes. She sat up trembling, her breath ragged. Ethan rushed to her side. It's okay, you're safe. But she was staring past him, eyes wide with realization. It wasn't an accident, she whispered. Your father, he was there. Ethan froze. What did you say? He was there that night, she said, voice breaking. He pulled me out of the car. I remember his voice. He said, you were never meant to be part of this family. The words cut through the air like a blade. Ethan's stomach turned cold. His father had always disapproved of her, but this was beyond cruelty. My God, he breathed. Anna clutched his hand. He made them think I died. He made me disappear. He stared at her horrified as the storm outside raged anew, lightning flashing against the glass. 15 years of grief had been built on a lie. His father hadn't just destroyed their love, he had buried her alive in another life. The city was still asleep when Ethan stood in the middle of his penthouse living room. Every light turned off, except for the faint blue glow spilling from the window. Anna sat across from him on the couch, her face pale, her hands trembling around a mug of untouched tea. The storm had passed, leaving the world wet and quiet, but inside both of them, the storm was only beginning. Say it again. Ethan said, his voice low but unsteady. Anna swallowed hard, staring at the floor. I remember now. Your father pulled me from the wreck. I saw his face before I blacked out. He thought I was dying. He said, this is how it should have ended. You were never meant to be part of this family. Her voice cracked at the last word. Ethan's jaw tightened. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The clock ticked softly between their heartbeats. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded like a man strangling the truth. My father covered up your survival. He must have paid the hospital to change the records to make it look like you died. Anna's eyes filled with tears. Why, what could he possibly gain control? Ethan said bitterly. He wanted to control everything, me, the company, my future. You didn't fit his plan. He said loving you would destroy me. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. He destroyed me anyway. Anna pressed her palms together, whispering through her tears. I woke up in a hospital. They said I'd been in a crash, that no one knew who I was. When no one came to claim me, I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe I wasn't worth looking for. Ethan's chest tightened as he knelt beside her, his hands hovering near hers. You were worth everything. She looked up, eyes shimmering with both fury and sorrow. You don't understand. He didn't just take me away from you. He erased me. I built a new life because I didn't have a choice." "You weren't supposed to," Ethan said softly. "You were supposed to have your life, your art, your dreams." "But I didn't," she said, shaking her head. "I've been living someone else's story. Anna Reed wasn't born. She was invented by your father's lies." The air between them grew heavier until it felt impossible to breathe. Ethan rose abruptly, pacing toward the window. His reflection looked back at him, a man carved out of guilt and rage. "I'll confront him," he said finally. "He'll tell me everything." Anna stood too, her voice trembling. "And then what? You think one confession will undo 15 years. You think you can just fix this? I'll try," he said. "Because I can't live another day knowing I did nothing." "You did nothing," she said, her tone breaking into disbelief. "That's the point. You lived your life. You built an empire while I was trying to remember my own name. You think I didn't suffer?" His voice rose. "You think success erases grief. I buried you, Lily. I buried the woman I loved and spent every day since trying not to drown in that emptiness. Don't call me that." She snapped, tears spilling. "I'm not her anymore." He froze, the sound of her voice slicing through him like glass. "Then who are you?" She looked at him with such quiet pain it nearly undid him. "I don't know," she said, "but I know I can't be her again just because you want me to be." Ethan stepped forward, desperate, his voice breaking. "I don't want the past. I want you. Whatever name, whatever scars. You're still the woman I stop." She interrupted, shaking her head violently. "You're not hearing me. I can't love you, not now. Not after knowing what your family did." The words hit harder than any blow. He staggered back, hands trembling. "I didn't know. But you're still him," she said, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You're his son, his legacy. Every time I look at you, I see the man who stole my life. I'm not my father." "Aren't you?" she whispered. "You have his name, his money, his power. Maybe you didn't choose what he did, but you benefited from it." Her words landed with merciless precision. Ethan wanted to argue, to tell her that the empire had never felt like his, that every dollar was haunted by her absence. But she wasn't wrong. He turned away, voice breaking. "What do you want me to do, Anna? Tell me." She hesitated before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let me go." The silence that followed was unbearable. The sound of the city outside car horns whine, the faint hum of traffic, felt cruelly normal. Ethan closed his eyes. "If that's what you want." She nodded, her face pale but resolute. "It's what I need." The next morning she left before sunrise. Ethan watched from the window as she walked down the street with her son's hand in hers, her figure shrinking with every step. He wanted to run after her to beg, but his feet felt anchored to the floor. He whispered the only word that mattered. "I'm sorry." By noon he was standing in the marble foyer of his father's mansion, the place where every nightmare had begun. Robert Cole sat by the fireplace, immaculate in a tailored suit, as though the past 15 years hadn't stolen anything from him. "Ethan," he greeted coolly. "I wasn't expecting you. You erased her." Ethan said, his voice low but shaking. "You made the world believe she was dead." His father's eyes flicked up, cold and calculating. "I saved you. You destroyed me." "You were 20, Robert said. "Infatuated. That girl would have ruined you. I couldn't let that happen." Ethan's hands clenched. "You buried a living person." "I made a choice," Robert said simply. "The same kind of choice that keeps this family alive. You're welcome." "I'm done being part of your legacy," Ethan said, voice trembling with fury. You can have your company, your reputation. I want nothing." Robert's expression hardened. "You'd throw away your inheritance for a ghost." Ethan stared back, his voice now calm and deadly. "She's not a ghost. You made her one." He turned and walked out before his father could answer, his chest burning with rage and shame. That night he sat alone in his empty apartment, the city lights stretching endlessly below him. Everything he'd built felt hollow. He opened the wooden box that had sat on his desk for years and took out the silver pendant, the twin to hers. It gleamed softly in the dark, still engraved with the words she once whispered to him. "May our hearts always find north," he whispered to himself. "They killed the girl she was, but I'll protect the woman she became." In a small apartment miles away, Anna stared out at the rain-soaked skyline. Jamie slept in his room, safe, oblivious. She touched the pendant at her throat and whispered the name she could no longer deny, Lily Hart. The sound of it made her weep. She had found herself again, but the cost was a broken heart. Ethan gave up everything that night. He signed his resignation papers, liquidated his shares, and sent a single email to his father. "You win the empire. I keep my soul." Then he disappeared from public life. No interviews, no statements, no trace. The press speculated endlessly, but he was gone. Anna tried to move on, to focus on her son, on the life she'd rebuilt. But sometimes when the night was quiet and the wind carried the scent of rain, she swore she could hear him whisper her name somewhere far away. Still searching for her through the dark, the first snow of winter dusted the city in silence when Ethan Cole returned not to reclaim his empire, but to build something new from the ruins of everything he'd lost. 6 months had passed since he walked away from his father's fortune. The tabloids had long moved on to fresher scandals. The company had appointed a new CEO, and Robert Cole's empire stood untouched. But Ethan had chosen a different path. With the money he'd kept, what he'd earned himself, not inherited, he founded a nonprofit organization called the North Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of car accidents and survivors of identity loss. It was his way of rewriting the past, of turning guilt into purpose. He no longer wore suits, no longer sat in boardrooms filled with power and deceit. Instead, he spent his mornings at a modest downtown office, filled with volunteers, doctors, and social workers, people who wanted to make a difference. He rarely smiled, but when he did, it was real. What he didn't know was that fate had already begun, stitching his world back to hers. Across the city, Anna stood in line at a small clinic holding her resume. Her catering jobs had never come back, and the rumors that followed her made it impossible to find steady work. But she wasn't here to beg for charity. She was here to work. A friend had told her the North Foundation was hiring nurses and coordinators for its outreach programs. The irony was cruel and poetic. She didn't know Ethan was behind it. The application didn't mention his name. She just needed a job that made sense, something that mattered. When she stepped into the waiting area, her eyes caught the foundation's logo, a compass pointing north. Something inside her shifted. She touched her necklace unconsciously, tracing the engraving. Next, a voice called. She entered the small interview room where a woman in her 40s smiled warmly. "Miss Reed, thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Lauren Shaw, Program Director." The interview was short, but Anna spoke with quiet conviction about empathy, about caring for others, even when life had been cruel. Lauren listened, moved. "You're hired," she said. Anna exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. 2 weeks later, she started work. The foundation was unlike any place she'd ever been. Humble, filled with hope instead of ambition. On her first day, she noticed a plaque on the wall that read, "Founded by Ethan Cole." Her pulse stuttered. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. He was here or had been. Her first instinct was to quit, but something stronger kept her rooted. She wanted to see for herself who he had become. It took 3 days before their paths crossed. She was organizing patient files when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "You're doing that wrong," Ethan said softly. She froze the folders slipping from her hands. Slowly she turned. He looked different, simpler, grounded, dressed in rolled-up sleeves and jeans. No armor of wealth, no cold distance. Just a man stripped bare of everything except truth. "I didn't know you worked here," he said. "I didn't know you ran it," she replied quietly. For a long moment they said nothing. Then he smiled, not with triumph or apology, but something fragile. "You look well." "You don't," she said before she could stop herself. He laughed softly. "Fair." She gathered the scattered papers, avoiding his gaze. "If you're worried, I'll quit. Don't. I need this job." "I'm not worried," he said gently. "You belong here more than I do." Over the following weeks, their encounters were brief, but charged with unspoken things. They worked together on projects, shared meetings, exchanged polite words about schedules and funding. But beneath the professionalism, an ache lingered, the quiet hum of something unfinished. One evening after the office had emptied, Ethan found her sitting alone in the break room, staring out at the falling snow. "You shouldn't stay so late," he said. "Neither should you," she replied. He leaned against the doorframe studying her. "I didn't start this place for redemption," he said. "At least not only for that. I started it because I needed to believe good could come from pain." She looked at him, her expression softening. "It did," she said quietly. "You gave people a second chance." He hesitated before answering. "I was hoping it might give me one too." The words hung in the air, trembling. She turned back to the window, the reflection of city lights flickering across her face. "You're not the same man I met in that gallery," she said, after a long silence. "You're quieter, sadder, and you?" he asked. "I'm not the same woman either," she said, "but maybe that's a good thing." He nodded, his throat tight. "Maybe it is." A week later, the North Foundation hosted a fundraiser, nothing extravagant, just a gathering of donors and patients sharing stories. Anna moved through the crowd with a confidence she hadn't felt in years. At one point, she found herself standing by a photo display of past recovery cases. Ethan approached quietly beside her. "They're alive because of you," she said, gesturing to the photos. "Because of us," he corrected. She smiled faintly. "You always did like sharing credit." He looked at her, his voice soft. "I just like sharing the world with you." She blinked, caught off guard by the tenderness in his tone. Before she could respond, someone called her name and she excused herself, but the warmth of his words lingered long after. That night, after the event, she found an envelope on her desk. Inside was a small painting, one she didn't remember finishing. It was a recreation of the old shoreline piece, but this time there were 2 figures, instead of one, standing side by side under the same horizon. At the bottom, a handwritten note. "No matter how far we drift, the North will always guide us home." Her fingers trembled as she read it. Tears blurred her vision. She looked out the window and saw Ethan across the street. waiting under a street lamp, snow falling around him. She hesitated only a moment before stepping outside. The cold bit at her skin, but the air between them felt warm. "You kept it," she said, holding up the painting. "It kept me," he answered. They stood in silence, the city moving around them in slow motion. "You gave me back my name," she whispered. "You gave me back my faith," he replied. She smiled through tears. "Maybe we're even then." "Not even," he said. "Just beginning." He reached for her hand, not forcefully, just open, waiting. For a moment she hesitated, then she took it, and in that simple gesture, the years between them dissolved. The snow fell softly, and somewhere in the distance, the city clock chimed midnight, the sound of something old ending and something new beginning. Spring came quietly, thawing the edges of winter, as if the world itself was ready for forgiveness. The city bloomed again, soft greens and golden light replacing gray skies. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the weight in his chest ease. The North Foundation had become more than a project, it was a purpose. And Anna was part of it. They saw each other almost every day now, working side by side. Their silences no longer sharp but soft, filled with a comfort that came from understanding. Yet neither of them had dared to cross the invisible line between healing and love. Until one afternoon, everything changed. The foundation was hosting an art therapy event for recovering patients. Canvases lined the courtyard, brushes and colors spread like fragments of second chances. Ethan arrived early, carrying boxes of supplies. When he looked up, Anna was already there, her hair pulled back, sunlight catching the faint silver of her necklace. For a moment, he just watched her paint, her movements slow, deliberate, alive. He remembered how her hands used to dance across a canvas, how she used to lose herself in creation. Now he saw traces of that woman again, the one he thought he'd buried. "You still paint like you're chasing something," he said softly. She glanced at him, smiling. "Maybe I am." What he asked. She dipped the brush into the color blue, her tone gentle. "Peace." He stepped closer, his presence calm but charged. "Have you found it some days?" She said, then looked up at him. "Some days it's closer when you're near." The words hung between them like a heartbeat. He hesitated, afraid to breathe wrong, afraid she'd vanish again. But instead she set her brush down and faced him fully. "Ethan, why did you really start this foundation?" He exhaled slowly. "Because I couldn't bring back what I lost, but I could save others from the silence we lived in. I thought maybe if I gave enough, I'd finally forgive myself." "And have you?" she asked softly. He smiled, sadness flickering behind his eyes. "I'm still learning." She nodded. "Me too." The sound of children's laughter drew their attention. Jamie was nearby, helping paint a mural with other kids, his hands stained with bright colors. He looked up and waved his grin wide. "Mom, look." Anna laughed, waving back. Ethan watched the boy for a long moment, something tender breaking open inside him. "He's a good kid," he said. "He's everything," she replied. "He's my reason for fighting." And his father, Ethan, asked gently. Anna's eyes softened. "Gone before he knew I was pregnant. I never held anger for it. Life just happened." Ethan nodded, then looked back at the boy. "He deserves to know what real love looks like." Anna turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "So do we." Time slowed, their gazes locked. There was no music, no grand gesture, just two souls recognizing that they had already found what they'd been searching for. Later that evening, after the event ended and the courtyard emptied, Anna found Ethan alone by the mural. The sky had turned lavender streaked with gold. He was holding a small wrapped object. "What's that?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Something that used to belong to you." He handed it to her. Inside was a framed print of the old painting, The Shoreline from their youth. But this time there were 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a child, standing beneath the same rising sun. Her breath caught. "You changed it." "We changed," he said softly. "And I wanted it to reflect that." She looked at the painting, then at him. "Why are you giving this to me?" He hesitated, then took a step closer. "Because I need to say something, and I can't do it without showing you this first." His voice trembled. "You built a life without me, Lily. You survived, loved, raised a child, became stronger than anyone I've ever known. But if you'll let me, I'd like to be part of it now." Her eyes filled her lips, parting in disbelief. "You mean that?" every word he whispered. "I don't want to rewrite the past. I just want to live whatever time is left with you in the present." For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she stepped forward, closing the space between them, her hand trembling as it found his. "You already are," she said, voice breaking. Ethan exhaled like a man finally allowed to breathe. He reached for her, hesitant, reverent, and when their foreheads met, everything stilled. The years of separation, pain, loss, they melted under the quiet truth that love had found them again, not as who they were, but as who they'd become. A soft laugh broke the silence. They turned to see Jamie standing nearby, smiling with the kind of innocence only children have. "Are you two done staring?" he teased. Anna laughed through her tears, wiping her cheeks. "Almost, sweetheart." Ethan crouched down to Jamie's level. "Hey, buddy," he said gently. "You like painting?" "Yeah," the boy grinned. "Mom says I'm good." Ethan smiled. "She's right, you've got her hands." Jamie tilted his head curiously. "Do you like my mom?" Ethan glanced up at Anna, whose cheeks turned pink. He smiled back at the boy. "More than anything." "Good," Jamie said, with a satisfied nod. "Then you can sit with us next time we paint." Ethan looked at Anna again, and she nodded through her tears. "We'd like that." The sun dipped behind the skyline, bathing them in golden light. For the first time in 15 years, everything felt whole. They stood together, 3 silhouettes against the fading sky. A family not born from perfection, but from pain, courage, and grace. And when Ethan's hand found Anna's again, she didn't pull away. She squeezed it, her voice soft as the breeze. "Welcome home." A year later, the ocean stretched wide and endless under the afternoon sun waves, brushing against the sand like whispers of the past learning to rest. The air was filled with salt and laughter, the sound of seagulls circling above a small cafe that sat along the quiet New England coast. Its sign read, "The North Star," the letters painted in soft blue, the same shade as the horizon. Inside, the smell of coffee and fresh bread mingled with the scent of sea breeze. Behind the counter, Anna wiped down a table, her hair tied loosely, a content smile curving her lips. Light poured through the windows, catching the silver crescent necklace at her throat. She glanced toward the door just as it opened, the bell chiming gently. Ethan stepped in, carrying a stack of fresh flowers, wrapped in paper sunlight framing his shoulders. He looked different now, happier, grounded, his eyes brighter than they had ever been. "Delivery for the boss," he teased. "Late as always," she said, smiling. "You're lucky you're handsome." "Lucky or strategic?" he asked, setting the flowers on the counter. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Both." He leaned in and kissed her cheek. lingering just a second longer than necessary, the gesture easy, natural, like breathing. "How's business? Better than I dreamed," she said, glancing toward the terrace where a group of young volunteers from the North Foundation sat sharing coffee and stories with a few patients recovering from physical therapy. "We get new faces every week. People come here not just for food, but for hope." Ethan smiled at that. "That's what we wanted." She nodded. "No, that's what you built." "We built it," he corrected gently. She looked at him for a long moment, eyes soft. "You still do that," she said. "What turn everything into we? Because it's always been us." He replied, his tone quiet, sure. From the back room, Jamie ran out his hair, messy, holding a paper plane, painted with little stars. "Dad, look. I made this one fly all the way to the porch." Ethan crouched, grinning wide. "That's impressive, champ. Maybe next time we'll make it reach the beach." "Promise, promise." Jamie hugged him tight, then darted off again, the plane soaring through sunlight. Anna watched them, her chest tightening with that familiar, overwhelming warmth. Sometimes it still astonished her how the universe had twisted and broken and healed itself just to lead her back here to him. Later that evening, after the cafe closed and the last car disappeared down the coastal road, they sat together on the terrace with cups of tea, the ocean glowing silver beneath the moonlight. The world was quiet, except for the rhythmic sigh of the waves. Ethan leaned back, one arm draped along the chair beside hers. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked softly. She tilted her head. "About what? The years we lost." Her eyes lingered on the horizon. "Sometimes, but not with sadness anymore. Those years made us who we are. Maybe we needed to lose each other to learn how to love again." He studied her, the curve of her smile, the peace in her expression. "You sound like someone who's finally forgiven the world." "Not the world," she said, her gaze finding his. "Myself." He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. "You always were my compass," he murmured. "You just forgot for a while." She smiled through tears. "And you never stopped searching." They sat in silence, the weight of everything that had been and everything that would come resting between them like an unspoken vow. After a moment, Anna stood and walked inside. She returned holding something small, wrapped in a linen cloth. She placed it in his hands. "Open it." Inside lay the twin pendants, the crescent moon, and the compass rose-polished whole again. "You kept yours all these years," she said. "Now they're together, like they were meant to be." He traced the engraving with his thumb. "May our hearts always find north." His voice caught. "We did, didn't we?" "We did," she whispered. The moonlight spilled over them soft and forgiving. Ethan slipped the necklace around her neck, letting the pendant rest against her heartbeat. "It still looks right on you," he said. "It feels right," she replied. He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Do you ever think about that night at the gala?" She laughed softly, "The one where I spilled champagne all over your $1,000 suit." "Exactly that one," he said, laughing quietly. "I used to think fate was cruel for making me find you that way. Now I realize it was giving me another chance to see you for who you really are." "And who's that?" she teased gently. "A woman who survived everything meant to break her." He said, his tone tender, "and still had room in her heart to forgive." She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. "You make it sound easy." "Nothing about us was easy," he murmured. "That's what makes it real." The waves rolled closer, the breeze carrying salt and memory. They sat there for a long time, holding each other, the world around them, dissolving into quiet perfection. In the distance, the old lighthouse blinked steadily, its light sweeping across the water as if keeping watch. Inside the cafe, on one of the wooden walls, hung 2 framed paintings, one of a lonely figure on a shore titled The Forgotten Promise, and beside it another of 3 figures standing beneath a sunrise, hand in hand, titled The Found Home. Beneath them, a small brass plaque read, "Love doesn't wait in the same place. Sometimes it travels the world just to meet you again." As the night deepened, Anna rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. "Do you think people like us ever really find peace?" she asked quietly. "I think we don't find it," he said, brushing her hair gently. "We build it, day by day, choice by choice." She smiled, her eyes closing. "Then let's keep building." The ocean whispered against the rocks as he pulled her closer. In the window reflection, the 2 pendants glowed faintly. The moon and compass reunited after 15 years of searching, somewhere between loss and rediscovery, between silence and song. They had found what everyone spends a lifetime looking for, a place that felt like home. And as dawn began to rise over the water, painting the horizon in gold, Anna whispered into the quiet, "We found our north." Ethan smiled, his voice soft as the tide. "And this time we'll never lose it again." Before you go, take a breath and let this story linger in your heart for a moment. Because maybe, just like Ethan and Anna, we've all loved someone we thought we lost forever. Someone whose memory still flickers in the quiet corners of our lives. Maybe you've wondered what it would feel like if fate gave you one more chance, one moment to say the words you never said, to hold the person you once let go. This story isn't just about a billionaire and a waitress. It's about rediscovering the courage to forgive, to love again, and to believe that time, no matter how cruel, can't bury what's meant to be found. If this story touched something inside you, if it reminded you of the person you still think about, when the world goes quiet, then tell us where you're watching from, and let us know what part of this journey stayed with you most. Was it the moment Ethan saw that familiar necklace? The night Anna finally remembered her name? Or the day they opened the North Star Cafe, where healing met hope under the same sky that once tore them apart? Your voice matters here. This community isn't just about stories. It's about the hearts behind the screens. The people who believe, like we do, that love never really dies. It just gets lost, waiting for the right moment to be found again. So if you believe in second chances, in broken promises made whole, and in the quiet beauty of 2 souls finding their way home, after years apart, then hit that subscribe button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it tonight, and remind them that no matter how far they've drifted, the heart always knows where north is. Drop a comment below. Tell us your favorite moment. Tell us who you're thinking of right now, or simply write "I believe," because sometimes the simplest words carry the heaviest truths. And when the screen fades to black and the music ends, maybe what stays with you won't just be the story of Ethan and Anna, but the echo of a promise that's been waiting all along. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for believing. This is Emma's Stories, and as always, wherever you are, in the world tonight, may your heart find its way home.